So hopefully everyone can see the screen okay. So the recent legislation, I think most of you all are familiar with this, the CARES Act and the Economic Aid Act, as well as the American Rescue Plan Act, allocating billions of dollars to help small businesses across the nation. And as a result, we've set up various COVID programs, including the PPP program. I'm sure most everyone is familiar with this. It includes the first draw and second draw loans through the SBA. It's actually administered through our lenders here. And the SBA lenders, when we started, we had about 68 lenders. Now we have 435 that were working on PPP loans for folks. In addition to that, we have our economic injury disaster loans, the targeted EIDL advances. Those are just for low income communities right now. We have, of course, our shuttered venue operator grants that we rolled out earlier in the month. And then we just rolled out our Restaurant Revitalization Fund. We'll talk about that primarily. I think that's of most interest. And then we made changes to some of our regular loan programs, as well as subsidy payments. Okay, so one thing this is just a visual representation of that, but one of the things I wanted to mention, we are hearing word that the PPP funds may be exhausted today. So we're not sure if folks are going to be able to continue to apply for a PPP loan through the remainder of May, like we anticipated. So we'll be sure to let folks know via our newsletter if in fact that's the case. Again, this is just the funding that was allocated. I won't get into that. But I do want to spend some time talking about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So Congress allocated $28.6 billion for this specific fund. You can see some of the set-asides there. There's $5 billion set aside for eligible entities with gross receipts during 2019 of not more than 500,000. And then they also set aside $4 billion for applicants with 2019 gross receipts from 501 to 1.5 million. We've set aside $500 million for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than 50,000 as well. Now keep in mind, during these first 21 days of rollout, which the portal just opened yesterday, we're going to be prioritizing grants to women-owned business, veteran-owned businesses, and then minority-owned businesses. So, we'll see how long these funds last. It sounds like a lot of money, but we anticipate it's going to go very quickly. Okay, these are all the eligible entities, and it's very broad in scope. Of course, it does include restaurants, but you can see there it also includes food stands, food trucks, food carts, brew pubs, breweries, distilleries, snack and alcoholic beverage bars. So for example, coffee shops and ice cream shops can also qualify, as well as bakeries and inns. So again, fairly broad in scope. We do have our new airport terminal, and you can see there that it does include businesses within an airport terminal, as well as those that are tribally owned. Okay, ineligible entities. So any state or local government operated business, if there are affiliates, they cannot have more than 20 locations as of March 13th, 2020. If they have an application already in for the Shuttered Venue Grant Program, they're not eligible for this. And then those that have been permanently closed. So if you closed your doors, 6 months ago, you're not going to be eligible to receive this funding. Well, and also nonprofit organizations. And then you can see there the bankruptcy stipulations as well. Okay, the award amount. So we can go up to $5 million per location. but we're going to cap it at 10 million. The minimum amount of the award would be 1,000. Okay. There are different ways to look at the grant calculation, and this is how we're going to look at it through SBA lens, which is the first calculation would be applicants in operation prior to January 1st, 2019. We're going to look at the 2019 gross receipts minus the 2020 gross receipts. And we're going to subtract out any PPP loans that you may have received. Okay. Under calculation 2, that pertains to applicants that began operations partially through 2019. And we're going to look at the average 2019 monthly gross receipts times 12 minus the 2020 gross receipts. And again, subtracting out any PPP loans that you may have received. And then finally, the third way of looking at it is applicants that began operations on or between January 1st, 2020 and March 10th, 2021, and applicants not yet opened, but may have incurred those eligible expenses. So we're going to look at the amount spent on the eligible expenses between February 1st, 2020 and March 11th, 2021, minus the 2020 gross receipts, and again, subtracting out any PPP loans that you may have received. And you can see there the definition of how SBA looks at gross receipts. It does not include any amounts received from any PPP loan, whether it was a first draw or second draw loan, or any section 1112 payments, idle loans, idle advances, targeted idle advance, or state or local grants. Okay. The proceeds can be used for a variety of different purposes. They could be used for payroll costs, sick leave, interest, mortgages, rent, utility payments, food and beverage expenses, supplier costs, operational expenses, etc. Also, you can use it for construction of outdoor seating. So if you're looking to expand and have that outdoor seating for folks to be able to come to your restaurant, we cover that as well. Okay, the covered period is February 15th, 2020 through March 11th, 2023. These are the various ways that you can apply. You can work through a point of sale vendor, and there are specifications for that. As you can see there, you can also go out to our SBA online portal. And again, that just opened yesterday. Folks had been registering prior to the launch of the portal, but now you can just simply go in and submit an application. If you have questions or concerns about your application, the status of your application, there's a telephone hotline that SBA set up, and we have a bunch of people manning that hotline. So the number there is 844-279-8898. You can also reach out to us, but again, we're going to refer you probably back to that hotline number, because here in SBA, OCA is basically, CAP Access is basically administering these grants, but folks are really swamped. So with the hotline number, folks are getting back to those business owners very rapidly. Okay, so here's the different documents that you'll need to apply. Under calculation 1 and 2, you're going to need your application, of course, the 3172 SBA form, tax verification, your 2019 gross receipts and tax returns, and then 3 months of bank statements. Okay, and then you can see there the preferred documents, which would include your 2020 federal tax returns as well as your 2020 gross receipts. And then here's what we can accept, which is a point of sale report for the 2020 gross receipts, as well as other financial statements that have been prepared. Under calculation 3, of course, you're still going to need that 3172 SBA form, tax verification, and 3 months of bank statements. And then you can see there the preferred documents. Okay. Additional application information. So applications are going to be processed in order that they are received. Now, keep in mind, 28.6 billion is nationwide. That's the funding nationwide. There are literally hundreds of thousands of business owners that have already submitted their application. They were queued up and ready to go when the portal opened. So if you are interested in applying for this, please get your application in as soon as possible. Here's a different take on it versus the Shuttered Venue grant. You do not need to have a DUNS identifier or be registered in SAM.gov. You do if you're going to apply for the Shuttered Venue grant. Priority dates, as I mentioned before, we're giving priority to those minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses for the first 21 days. And then we're going to be looking at all eligible applications after that time frame, as long as funding is still available. Okay. Applicants will have to self-certify in the portal to meet the eligibility requirements. Now, keep in mind, you know, we could do audits on these. We're gonna check them, but we are trying to process these very quickly within a couple of weeks, if possible. Okay. So these are the program impacts that I mentioned. Again, if you have already received a PPP loan, we're going to subtract that out of the funding calculation for the grant that you would receive through the RRF. When an SBA approves the grant for the applicant, the SBA will decline any unapproved applications for a PPP loan from the same applicant. Okay, so if the applicants are both in the, or the applications are both in the queue at the same time, that's how we're going to address it. If an applicant received a PPP loan, the applicant must use the same EIN number for its application, okay? And upon applying for the RRF, the applicant must withdraw any outstanding PPP applications in the system. Again, an applicant that hasn't applied for or received a Shuttered Venue grant is eligible for the RRF. Okay, and here's the reporting. The use of funds assessment. So after the total awarded funds have been exhausted, entities must provide a detailed expenditure report and certification for the required period. Okay, so you're going to have to get that prepared and back to SBA. Until an applicant completes the use of the funds assessment beginning December 2020, applicants are required to provide self-reported, unaudited data detailing the use of the funds for each year through 2023. And then SBA will provide additional guidance that outlines detailed reporting requirements as we roll this out. So best practices, make sure to the extent possible that your application is complete with all the required documentation. What will happen is you will get kicked out of the system and rejected, declined basically, or there'll be a note in it that you don't have all the required documents. The problem with that is you will probably lose your place in the queue. So you want to try to get everything completed up front and ready to go when you hit the send button, okay? You can use CPAs to help you as well as other accounting professionals. We also, of course, have our SBDC network. Megan is available to help you through the process. And Megan, of course, knows that if she has any questions, she can reach out. The SBA will not be able to make corrections on behalf of the applicants. So you can see here again, the hotline number that you can call if you realize that maybe you forgot to attach a required document, okay? And then again, just get it as complete as possible up front. Okay, now I'm going to just quickly touch on the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant program that we rolled out. We rolled this out April 8th, within I think an hour or so. The portal, we totally crashed the system and our vendors had to work on getting it back up and running. It's now open, the portal's open for applications. But again, we had so many people that had applied all at one time, it just crashed the system. Okay, for the Shuttered Venue Operator Grants, these are the eligible entities. Again, this one's pretty broad in scope as well. You can see there it includes operators or promoters, theater producers, live performing arts organizations, museums, zoos, aquariums, motion picture theaters, and talent representatives. You had to be fully operational on February 29th, 2020, with a gross earned revenue loss of at least 25% from one quarter in 2020 as compared to 2019. And that quarter has to be, again, a comparable quarter. So you can't take quarter one and compare it to quarter four. It has to be quarter one compared to quarter one. You have to demonstrate that you intend to resume operations, and you can't be controlled or owned by an entity on the National Securities Exchange. You can see there the employee breakdown in terms of what's an FTE versus a half-time employee. And then for the first 60 days of this program, we've set aside $2 billion for businesses with no more than 50 employees. Okay. And this is just a further breakdown of the eligible entities. Megan's going to share this presentation with you, so I won't get into all that detail. An applicant will not qualify if the place of business is not in the U.S. Or doesn't operate primarily in the U.S. You won't qualify if the live performances or your sales products are of any sexual nature. If you've received more than 10% of the 2019 gross revenue from the federal government. If you own or operate a venue in more than one country or more than 10 states, okay? If you have more than 5 affiliates, and if you're a museum, if an affiliate has already received 10 million in awards, that's a maximum, okay? Again, up to 10 million, it's dependent on outcome of initial round and supplemental grants awarded. If you were in operation on January 1st, 2019, the grant amount is 45% of the gross earned revenue during 2019, okay? If you were in operation after January 1st, 2019, the grant amount is the average monthly gross earned revenue for each month in operation in 2019, and then you multiply that by 6. Again, it will be reduced, and keep this in mind, it'll be reduced from any PPP loan amounts that you've already received. Okay, the grants may be dispersed in installments or a lump sum payment. And then down below, again, we just wanted to further define what a gross earned revenue is versus gross revenue. Okay. Application priorities. So, again, we opened the portal on April 8th. It crashed, and we just reopened it last week. For the first 14 days, the grants are awarded to those eligible entities of a 90% or greater revenue loss. The next 14 days is to eligible entities with 70% or greater revenue loss. And the revenue loss period would be from April 1st through December 31st, 2019 and 2020. You do need to have a DUNS number and you do need to be registered in SAM.gov, okay? There is a Shuttered Venue Operators Grant application checklist out on our website. And since Megan's going to be sharing this presentation with you, you can simply click on that link and it'll get you out there. But there's also the link to the landing page for the Shuttered Venue Grant. The proceeds, again, broad in scope. It can be used for payroll costs, rent, utilities, mortgage payments, debt payments, worker protection expenditures, payments to independent contractors. We know there's a lot of venues out there that, of course, have independent contractors working for them. It also covers administrative costs, state and local taxes and fees. Keep that in mind. As well as operating leases in effect as of February 15th, 2020, insurance, and then advertising, production, transportation, capital expenditures, etc. Okay, prohibited expenses is real estate, payment on any loans originating after February 15th, 2020, relending or anything of political nature. Other considerations is you must use the costs incurred from March 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2021. And you can use a second grant for expenses through June 20th, 2022. So again, you can get a second grant under this program as long as funding is still available. But you must return any amount of the grant within a 1-year grant disbursement or 18 months of the second grant received, okay? So any unused amount must be returned back to the SBA. And again, here's the link out there. We have a recorded video that we did the end of March. That's out on the website as well, or the YouTube site. Okay, Paycheck Protection Program. I'm gonna just skim through this, Megan, because if in fact we're running out of funding or we already have run out of funding, folks may not be able to apply anyway. So I'll be really brief on this. Okay, eligible entities, you can see there it's 500 employees or less, which qualifies for any small business under the SBA standards. But for the second draw, if it's a second PPP loan that you're going for, it's 300 employees or fewer. And then you can see there tribal businesses are covered, ag businesses, and nonprofits as well. You had to have been in operation on or before February 15th, 2020, okay? And then we added in all these other entities that are now eligible, including newspapers, television, radio stations, destination marketing organizations, and then the 501c3 nonprofits and internet publishing organizations. Payroll proceeds can be used for a variety of purposes, but you can see there that in order to get the full forgiveness, you have to use at least 60% for your payroll costs, okay? The loan amounts, and you can see there how it's calculated. The maturity is 5 years, 1% interest rate for anything that's not forgiven. There is a payment deferment that we look at as well. Okay, and that's this first draw, and then the second draw, similar loan terms for that too. Additional requirements. Again, I won't get into this. I kind of touched on that briefly. And then the application process. So again, you're going to need to find a PPP lender, an SBA lender. You can go out to those websites there to find a lender here within our state. You can also contact Megan or anyone else within the SBDC network. They have the lender list as well. These are the various forms that you'll need. And you also need payroll documentation, of course, to get that 60% or greater for forgiveness. You're also going to need any certifications that are required. And then again, work with the SBDC network if you have any questions, but your PPP lender should be fully up to speed as well. Okay, economic injury disaster loans. We are continuing with these. We still have funding available. And these are done through our Office of Disaster Assistance. You can see there the eligible entities, small businesses, nonprofit organizations. The credit elsewhere requirement is still applicable. You have to be independently owned and operated. The loan terms now go up to 500,000. We had capped it for a period of time at 150,000, but we've since lifted that cap. And then it would cover 24 months of economic injury. The interest rate is 3.75 for small businesses, 2.75 for nonprofits, 30-year maturity rate. And there is a deferment payment for the first year. The proceeds can be used for payroll, debts, accounts payable, etc. They cannot be used to refinance long-term debt, however. You have to have an acceptable credit history. Keep in mind that we have had some businesses that have not qualified and they just aren't sure why that is. If you don't have an acceptable credit history, that may have been the reason why you weren't eligible, okay? You have to also show that you can make repayments back to the SBA. All loans over 25,000 must be secured with available collateral. And again, we've since extended our deferment periods. So you can see there for EIDL loans, we've extended the deferment payments for all of those loans until 2022. The loans made in calendar year 2020, the first payment due is extended from 12 months to 24 months from the date of the note. And then EIDL loans made in calendar year 2021, the first payment due date is extended from 12 months to 18 months from the date of the note. Okay, now targeted EIDL advance, I'll be brief on this. These are still fairly limited in scope right now. They're basically being given to those located in low-income communities. So again, they're limited in terms of what we're giving out at this time. Okay, resources. So again, we have 15 different SBDC centers throughout our state. Of course, Megan's in one right there in Blanding. It's all free counseling. They also provide free training. And then we have, of course, our Women's Business Center in Cedar City as well. And then here's just our contact information. If you need to get a hold of us directly, it's our main phone line, our main email, as well as the Office of Disaster Assistance contact information. Okay, and we're going to turn it back to you, Megan, for Q&A.
Wonderful. I've got several questions. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so we've got several questions that have come across through the different streams and the Q&A side of things. And so let's go ahead and get started. As you have additional questions, go ahead and put them in the chat so that I can add them to my list. So the first one is, if I was turned down for an EIDL, does that disqualify me for the fund?
No, that shouldn't automatically disqualify you for the RRF. There's different criteria, different standards. And so, yeah, go ahead and still apply for that.
Yeah. Okay. The next one would be, I bought a restaurant in 2020 before COVID hit. I do not have tax returns on this restaurant because I haven't filed my 2020. Can I still apply?
Say that question again, Megan. They purchased the restaurant when?
They purchased a restaurant in 2020 before COVID hit. He does not have any, or he or she, I don't know, does not have any tax returns because they haven't been able to file their 2020 yet, can they still apply?
Yes, they can still apply. I mean, it's going to depend on which calculation method they use though. So if they don't have access to the prior owner's records, they would use calculation 3. But if they do get access to the prior owner's records, they can use 1 or 2.
It all depends on what kind of financial records. They
of
also need payroll records, right? Just to be clear.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, there's all different kinds of scenarios. Was it an asset purchase? Was it a purchase of the actual ownership interest? You know, is the same EIN number being used? So all that will factor into how you apply and calculate your award amount.
So the next one is, I'm a small home bakery and I have no employees. I just run the bakery myself. Can I still apply?
Yes, sole proprietors, the sole owner, you know, single owner operators. Yeah, they're eligible also.
The next one is, I have a bankruptcy on my record. Does that disqualify me?
Not necessarily. It depends on where in the bankruptcy process you are. If you previously received a discharge in your bankruptcy, then you should be okay. If you're currently in a pending bankruptcy, that would make you ineligible.
What if I suffered a loss because of COVID?
Well, I mean, basically everybody who applies for the fund is representing and certifying that they anticipate suffering a loss because of COVID. So that's the certification you're making to be eligible for an award.
Okay. What if I haven't received my EIDL yet, but I've applied?
Of course, we know the processing of the EIDL applications has been a little slow. So, you know, be patient with that and keep waiting. And if you need us to check on the status, we can do that. We can try to get an update for you. Of course, that I don't know if you're asking in terms of how does that affect your RRF application. It shouldn't. I mean, you should be able to move forward with that if that's what you're planning on doing.
Okay. I applied for RRF funds and my current status is IRS validation. My concern is the IRS has an incredible backlog. So my concern is that that this will affect my application process. Will the backlog on the IRS affect application processes? Do we know?
I'm not totally sure on that, but I don't think so. I mean, everybody has to go through that process. Everybody has to file the 4506T, which is the IRS verification. So everybody has to do that. So I don't anticipate that will affect anybody in particular.
Okay. I opened in November 2019. And I still open. So should I choose option 2?
Yes, the calculation 2 method would be appropriate for that. Somebody who opened during 2019, even though that's fairly late in the year. I mean, you're supposed to figure out, you know, your average monthly gross receipts or whatever. So it's only going to be a month's worth, but then you multiply that by the 12 or whatever.
I want to know who I can talk to about the hold or no release of funds for EIDL, and they have all my documents.
So they've applied for an EIDL loan and there's some kind of hold. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Is that what it's saying? Go ahead and send us an email here at our Utah General mailbox that we were showing at sba.gov, and we can try to check on that for them.
Can I apply first through the portal and then connect a POS vendor? So if they didn't know that they could apply through their POS vendor and they started the portal, can they connect the two?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know what the technological capabilities are of our system on that.
I don't know either. That's the first
I mean, if they've already processed their application through the portal and gotten a receipt that it's gone in and whatever, I would leave it at that.
If a person has their credit affected, will it affect their EIDL? So if COVID affected their credit and it's taken so long for them to get their EIDL, will that affect their chances now because it's taken so long?
I believe so. I mean, they do pull a credit report and it has to meet a certain level. And I understand the concern there and the issue, but I think that's how they do it. So.
Okay, I think that is all the information. But if I didn't answer your question, go ahead and send your question through again so that we can get it answered. But I think that we got them all. I used the same method. Okay. If you have 2 restaurants but 2 different legal LLCs, do you recommend 2 applications?
Yeah, I would recommend 2 separate applications. And I'm guessing that there's no kind of parent company that owns both LLCs. So if that's the case, if there's no parent company there, then yeah, I would recommend 2 different applications.
Awesome. What 3 months of bank statements are needed to apply?
So you need February, March, and April. However, we realize it's the beginning of May, and if the bank hasn't made your April statement available, you can do January, February, March.
Okay. One last call for questions. I'm looking across YouTube and Facebook real quick as well. If a person has their credit affected, can they apply for an EIDL?
I think, wasn't that the same as the previous question we answered? That
I think so, yeah.
So they will pull a credit report.
Yeah, they'll pull a credit report, and depending on where your credit's at will affect your ability to get an EIDL. Is it business credit or personal credit that they are viewing?
Well, I guess it depends on what time. I mean, if it's a sole proprietor, it's probably going to be the same thing. But if it's a business, I know they will pull the business credit.
Will the grant award be given directly local SBA approved banks?
Well, it will be, the grant award will be put directly into the account that you put in your application. So you'll enter your routing number, account number, and whatever, and the grant amount will go straight into there. So keep your eyes open for that. In one of the slides, we showed that they're anticipating like a 14-day turnaround on some of this. So then after that, and you will also be able to kind of check your status through the portal, but then also keep an eye on your bank account to see if the funds hit.
Awesome. Any other questions anybody has? Looks like we are about ready to wrap up. Could we get a copy of the slides? Marla, do you have any problem with me sending out a copy of the slides, or John?
No, I'll get them over to you right after this.
Perfect. Okay. If there is a parent company that has multiple different businesses inside, how do you differentiate the restaurant side from the other businesses that are making money?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have a parent company that owns several different subsidiaries, you would use whatever subsidiary is operating the restaurant, and that subsidiary with its EIN should apply for the RRF award.
I've had this question outside of this. If they have a parent company and they've applied for PPP under the parent company for all the companies, how does that going to affect their RRF? Because obviously they have to report that.
Right. That's a good question, and I'm not sure the answer on that.
Okay. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, I just put my email in the chat. If any of the other SBDC directors would like to, or Women's Business Center would like to put their emails in the chat as well, feel free to do so. We appreciate everybody joining us this morning. We will have round 2 at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time today. I do keep all the updates going through our Facebook channel. So if you do not follow us on Facebook and want to get kept up on this information, go ahead and follow us there. You can get that link through Eventbrite, or if you give me a minute, I'll go ahead and put it in the chat. We appreciate everybody joining us today. I will send out the slides and the replay of this as soon as we can get everything together, and we'll send that out for you. We appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, as well as you can request more information or help with your RRF. If you go to the very last page of your workbook, there is a QR code that says request information. If you go on that, it'll take you to a form sheet with that'll ask you for your information, and we will line you up with your local SBDC or Women's Business Center so that you can get the help that you need and get your questions answered. Like the SBA had just said, don't wait to fill out your application. Don't think that you have plenty of time. This money will go fast, and so we want to make sure that all those that need to get their applications in as soon as possible. Thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Megan, did somebody else have a question on the multi-business?
We do. We've got a question that says, have a second to clarify multi-business situation. You bet. Davin, what's your question? Go ahead and put it on. I'll go ahead and open this up so that we can, so that you can unmute and ask your questions if you would like. Davin.
Thank you. That would have been a really long text. It's sitting there for like an hour. Okay, so I'm assuming this is going to come up in our business meeting today. The owner of the company that we work underneath has gotten both PPPs for his side of it. And he's an office and leasing situation. Also, he has a banquet facility with bar, and then he has us as the catering as well. So his concern is, well, he's like, I've gotten some PPP. Should we even deal with this application at this point in time? And I'm like, well, I mean, you got to see what you can see. But the one side of his business does pretty well in obviously gross receipts and things of that nature. Now, it's been hammered hard with COVID, which, I mean, we're in Michigan. We can't work actually in the workplace now. We can't have banquets here up to 25 people. It's been an absolute nightmare. However, I'm not sure how you would separate. So our catering business technically doesn't have a payroll. We pay a management company to pay for those employees. Obviously, we have a payroll in a way, but not with, it's registered. So I guess the question which I had heard was the EIN obviously could be, the catering itself does have its own, obviously, EIN, does have its own bank account, such and such for that. Do you have any inclination as to how the PPPs would affect that application process with him on the other side? And if so, how do they calculate that at that point? So I'm assuming he's gotten a lot for, we have not gotten or received PPP for the actual catering at all, because we would have to have 60% hit for payroll, which we don't have a payroll technically. We pay a management company to do so. So we weren't eligible to do it on that side of the PPP. Does that make sense, I guess? But he's able to do it on his side because the management company is actually owned by him on the other side. So this is kind of like, it's so convoluted. It's so convoluted Which I think this really should have been more simplistic for us on our end of the company wise. Should have just broken off and done our own thing, but we're still under an entity at that point.
Right. I mean, go ahead and apply anyway with your EIN number for your catering company. They'll figure out, you know, and go through the questions. They'll ask you, you know, the associated questions about, you know, where the PPPs came from or whatever, and they'll figure that. They'll wade through that. The other thing I would recommend is calling that center hotline.
Okay, where was
Those
that?
guys
Is that number on? Was that on one of the slides? Was that on the slide? The center number?
Yeah, let me just, what I'll do is I'll just post that in the chat. 1 second.
Sorry about that.
Let's see. Trying to get back to it here.
So we should have it memorized with how many times we've got it.
I know.
Shouldn't it be
seriously.
like 911-2 or something like that right now? Because everybody's in trouble.
I called
Okay,
it
how
4
do I?
times yesterday. I mean, I feel like they know him by name that by now.
Megan, you're
So
slipping. You're slipping, Megan. What's going on with that?
So
So,
I just put that number in the chat there.
Okay, I got it.
They've been very good to respond, and they've got some answers to some of the technical questions too. So
Yeah, it's such a mess on our end. I don't even think he actually, because we used to have, not saying that we had employees, but we had people that worked for the catering that were underneath this management company, and they're all gone. They're all gone. This has wiped us completely out. So we have just a select few that are helping now to reestablish it, because we have not worked since March 18th of last year. It's just been us coming in to kind of move people over to the following years. So it's just a mess.
it sounds complicated. So work through that process. Call the center hotline.
Okay. I appreciate your guys' time. I really do. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
awesome. Were there any other questions that we missed with those that are still on here? I'm just going back and looking through the chat real quick, make sure we got it all. I think we did. I
Yep.
think we got it all. Awesome.
I have one up there for the EIDL loan.
Can I get the email? John, will you put the Utah general email in there? But Brenda,
Yeah.
what I will do is I will gather all the information from you, and then I will send it through John and Marla. So essentially it's the same thing. It's kind of, so it can be either way.
Okay, then, thanks.
But I would recommend that, I mean, if you are in another state, contact your local district office in that state.
Yeah,
They can
so
help
if you're
you.
in California, we need to work through the California district office.
I'm in Kansas.
Or you're in Kansas, sorry, we're all over the place.
Yeah.
I can help you get the Kansas district office number and
Sure.
email and stuff like that.
Okay.
So, okay, perfect. Well, we appreciate everybody joining us, and we hope that everybody has a great day. I think we're at that point. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me, and we'll get those answered as quickly as possible.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Megan.
Thank you. Have a great day. We'll see you too.